Record. So welcome everybody again, and to those who are watching the recording, welcome to our Lunch and Learn webinar today on the Regional Restoration Partnerships Program here at the Division of Ecological Restoration at the Department of Fish and Game here at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We're really excited to here today to talk to you about this really exciting partnership program and future potential opportunities for new partnerships. I just wanted to give everybody a little orientation on how to use a Zoom webinar. If you are not familiar with Zoom webinar, it's a little bit different than a traditional Zoom meeting. We will be exclusively using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen for answering questions as well as doing introductions. If there's anybody here today on the telephone dialing in, at the end of the presentation, we'll have time for questions and answers for folks on the computer and also people who dial in. If you dialed in, to raise your hand if you're having trouble, or to ask a question, dial *9 to raise your hand. And just to start, we wanted to do some introductions of the team here from DER, as well as give you all an opportunity to introduce yourself in the Q&A function and to test out how to do a Q&A. So to first introduce ourselves, my name is Robert Thomas Kearns. I am the DER's Restoration Partnerships Program Coordinator, alongside my colleague, Allison. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Perlman. I'm the Partnerships Program Manager for the Division of Ecological Restoration.
And also, we're joined by Callie. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Callie Willette. I'm in operations at DER, and I'm here in the background just as some tech support for Robert and Allison. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome. We see people who are starting to introduce themselves in the Q&A. Awesome. Welcome, welcome. And also, we're going to do a quick poll for folks to sort of get a sense of who's here in the room in an aggregate. So, Callie, whenever you're ready. So the poll questions are, number one, what organization affiliation are you representing this webinar? And then number two is where you're joining us from today, just to get a sense of where folks are coming from. Let's give folks a couple minutes to fill that out. Welcome. Right. I think that's good. How we doing on the poll, Callie? Great. Looks like majority of people are from a watershed nonprofit. We have the second is statewide nonprofit, and then local nonprofit. We also have folks from municipal government, regional planning associations, community members, and consultants. Everybody can see that on the screen, and we also have other. So definitely, if you're in the other category, feel free to introduce yourself in the Q&A as other people have been doing. Additionally, seeing where folks are joining us today, looks like the majority of folks coming from the greater Boston area. Got second choice northeastern Massachusetts and the Berkshires and Hill towns at Tide. Got Cape Cod, the island, Central Mass, Southeastern Mass, and some folks from outside of Commonwealth of Massachusetts and other states. Welcome. I'm glad you're excited to join and learn about our program. Great. Go to the next slide. Pass it off to my colleague, Allison.
Great. Thanks, Robert. And hello, everyone. We're very excited to be here today to talk about the DER Partnerships Program and current partnership outcomes. We're hoping to kind of lay a foundation for a better understanding for the unique aspects of our program and how the partnership's funding has been used to advance regional coalition building and restoration work in Massachusetts. We will touch briefly on our next request for responses and wrap up with any questions you may have for us. Next slide. Yeah, great, thanks. So as the impacts of climate change intensify in Massachusetts, we've heard an urgent call and demand for restoration, which is growing within our communities and our ecosystems. I'm sure you've all have seen a lot of these stats, but I want to reiterate how important they are. We have 3,000 aging dams. 90% no longer serve an active public purpose, such as flood control, hydropower, or drinking water storage. We have 25,000 culverts, with a majority failing or undersized. We see sea level rising along the coast and increasing storms inland. We're seeing increased municipal requests for assistance. Especially, we've seen this with the state grant programs over the last few years with extreme weather events. As evidence of this, the DER's Culvert Replacement Municipal Assistance Program received over 10 million in requests last funding round. There's also over 100 dam owners pursuing removal across the state and dozens more that have requested assistance. Additionally, the Massachusetts Municipal Vulnerability Program's plans have identified aging dams, undersized culverts, and a need for freshwater and coastal wetland restoration and floodplain protection. DER's mission is to restore and protect rivers and wetlands and watersheds in Massachusetts for the benefit of all people and the environment. Our team has an incredible set of experts moving projects forward to meet our mission, but we recognize we cannot do this work alone. We simply cannot hire enough project managers to do all the work that needs to be done. Based on our work over the last 15 years and countless conversations with restoration-focused organizations such as yourselves and public entities, there are gaps in restoration that need to be filled in order to meet the identified needs. These gaps to progress include municipalities wanting to support these projects. They see that critical link between restoration and resiliency, public health, and safety, but they often lack capacity and technical expertise to advance projects. Grant funding is also focused on project implementation and less funding on how to get there. Projects are often locally focused and lack a more comprehensive watershed scale approach to provide greater restoration impacts. And finally, regional collaboration can be hard and relationship building takes time. Next slide. So how do we fill these gaps? How do we move the needle forward? We think that regional organizations are really well positioned to fill these gaps. They are eager to advance the work and they can amplify restoration work throughout Massachusetts, but will require additional things. One, they need additional staff time. We have heard time and again how frustrated organizations are to see potential grant opportunities pass them by, but just don't have the staff to get projects grant ready, or once they do get grant funding, they don't have staff to advance the projects. Additionally, building restoration knowledge is critical. Restoration is ever-evolving practice, and it will be essential to building up organizations' knowledge to help them advance successful restoration projects that can adapt to the changing climate we see. Regional coordination and action will be critical to advance restoration at scale and increase the pace. It is imperative we support building this framework for Massachusetts to bring folks together, to build relationships, discuss their unique community needs, and identify a path forward together. It will also require kickstart project funding. It takes substantial work to move a project from idea to grant ready. This early project initiation phase is critical to develop the needed information to advance a project to the feasibility and design phase, yet it's not funded in typical grant programs. And finally, we all know it takes more than one grant to advance a project to construction. It will require gap funding to ensure the project is not delayed between grants. Next slide. The DER's partnership program begins to fill this gap. The partnership program was created to meet the needs identified through our work and our partners. It is also based on the understanding that restoration needs to be locally and regionally driven with state resources to support the work. The program provides support funding to enhance capacity to bring together regional partners, identify regional restoration needs, and develop a strategic plan. It also includes seed and gap funding. Seed funding to advance the earliest stages of the project, such as researching ownership and building project support, while also providing gap funding to advance projects between funding cycles. Partnerships funding isn't intended to fund the entirety of a project, but to catalyze high-value projects and to keep them moving forward to construction. Additionally, our program provides facilitation for peer-to-peer learning, where partners share knowledge, learn from others, and establish relationships, all of which are critical to increasing the pace and effectiveness of watershed-scale restoration efforts. The program also provides technical assistance. DR has that incredible depth of knowledge, as I mentioned. The partnership program connects partnerships to this knowledge through sharing of best practices, restoration resources, trainings, and advisory input on a variety of technical restoration topics. And finally, building a foundation for partnerships takes time and sustained investment for long-term success. The Partnerships Program has a multi-year support model which provides consistent investment to advance longer-term regional planning, coordination, and projects which span beyond 1 year. Next slide. DR provides support through 3 key stages of the partnership: catalyst, capacity and action, and leadership. This staged approach allows DR to meet partners where they are and deliver the level of support they need to progress to the next stage. Over time, it fosters growth and independence, with funding typically building in the early years and then tapers as partnerships mature. So that first stage is catalyst stage, which is typically year 1 in the program, focused on setting the partnership foundation through planning and relationship building. The second stage is capacity and action, which is typically years 2 through 6, where partnerships turn planning to action and initiate restoration project advancement. The final stage is leadership stage, typically years 7+, where partnerships build on a strong foundation and years of successful projects. Partnerships take on a more leadership role in regional restoration. I want to caveat that each stage has associated program years and funding levels, as I just mentioned, but this reflects a typical scenario, and it may vary based on funding availability and the pace of partnership development. I also want to note that DR determines stage placement based on annual application materials and organizational capacity and readiness. Next slide. So the Partnerships Program funding supports 3 key tasks: watershed planning and project identification, which is focused on development or update of our watershed restoration plan, identifying and prioritizing projects, and building relationships to advance community-driven projects. The restoration, project coordination, and project management task, which is really focused on typical coordination and project management tasks to advance projects from early phase work and research through construction. And the third task is restoration technical assistance. And this is really focused on providing support to municipalities or other NGOs who are carrying out restoration work in the region. This may take the form of one-on-one assistance or developing tools and trainings in public education. Next slide. I'll turn it over to you, Robert.
Thank you, Allison. So now I'm going to transition to talking a little bit about the current partnerships here in Massachusetts and what activities they are doing with their communities. Currently, we have 3 watershed nonprofits, community-based organizations, and our restoration partnerships include the Berkshire Clean Coal Connected Collaborative, which is out in Berkshire County in the western part of the state. We have the Merrimack Restoration Partnership, which is up in the Merrimack River Valley in the northeastern part of the state, as well as the Buzzards Bay Watershed Restoration Partnership, led by the Buzzards Bay Coalition in southeastern Massachusetts on the south coast. And all of these organizations are led by the restoration coordinators who help coordinate the work in the different watersheds. And their pictures here are displayed on the screen. We have Leah, Matthew, and Evelyn. And you may be wondering, how are these partnerships set up? There are different models that our program uses to help facilitate regional restoration in the different watershed areas. And each partnership set up their partnership in a way that works for them. So it was self-organized as part of previous RFRs to the Commonwealth. And each of them are defined by models on the early catalyst stage based on what would work for their areas of the Commonwealth. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have the Buzzards Bay Watershed Restoration Partnership. They're the most simplified restoration partnership, where the lead organization, Buzzards Bay Coalition, at the top half of that picture, is organizing with the partners that they work with to get input on restoration projects, including municipalities, land trusts, landowners, other NGOs, and just other community members. And it's, one single partnership, and led, like I said, by Buzzards Bay Coalition as the lead sponsor. On the right-hand side, we have the two what we would call umbrella partnerships. The umbrella was kind of, this picture makes a little more sense, but essentially they have the lead organization. Number one is the Merrimack Valley, the Merrimack River Watershed Council. They are in the center of the circle there, and they work with their lead the lead organization works with the core partners around the ring of the flower and the different petals of the flower. And through that partnership, the lead organization will give grant funding out to those organizations to lead restoration work in their region of the greater watershed. So it's a little bit more complicated partnership structure, and the coordinator helps coordinate all the work between all the organizations. But the exciting thing about both these programs and the partnerships is this bottom-up level of project prioritization and partnership building, which is kind of unique with the Commonwealth. Next slide. And you may be wondering, within the first 4 years, the partnerships have been working across over 100 municipalities, cities, and towns here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There's over 26 regional organizations involved and 150 high-value restoration projects across the states. So all the blue dots on the pictures. Additionally, the areas that they've self-selected for their watersheds are in the darker line around the different regions. Additionally, they've completed over 350 culvert assessments, and they're advancing 56 restoration projects through feasibility studies and designs. And you can see all the different pictures on the bottom of the different types of projects, including the salt marshes, the culverts, and the cranberry bog restoration and the dam removals. I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Allison.
Great. Thanks, Robert. So those metrics are great. It's basically based on 4 years of work so far, but we all know they didn't get there overnight. There was a lot of work that happened prior to the last slide that was just shown. And there's really 4 key elements from early work that helped pave the way. There's regional coalition building, goal setting and partnership planning, project identification and prioritization leading to a pipeline of high benefit projects, and partnerships' ability to leverage external funding. And Robert and I really wanted to dive into these a bit more and give you an example of each. Next slide. All right. So regional coalition building, it's clear that regional restoration and climate resiliency is hard work. But we found that working in partnership is inspiring and solution driven. The Partnerships Program has allowed for the creation of a forum which brings lower watershed and upper watershed communities to the table with different perspectives and values and interests. It's here where they learn and share from each other, coordinate efforts at that broader scale, and support each other and the communities they work within to find solutions together. Next slide, please.
Sorry.
So what does this look like? As an example, I wanted to talk about the partnerships culvert work. So municipalities are facing increased culvert failures and often lack that clear starting point for addressing them, leading to growing interest in culvert replacement support. In response, the partnerships have developed coordinated strategies to build local capacity and guide municipalities through this process. Their efforts, centered on culvert assessment training and completion of standardized assessments, have strengthened relationships with the towns, helping identify local priorities while aligning them with broader watershed and ecological needs. These partnership forums enable communities to work collaboratively together rather than in isolation, revealing opportunities that benefit multiple jurisdictions. The partnerships also regularly share with each other lessons learned, project prioritization approaches, and effective strategies for engaging municipalities, further strengthening regional capacity and consistency. Next slide, please. The second pathway that I wanted to highlight is goal setting and partnership planning. Partnerships identified restoration opportunities within their regions, utilizing existing plans, regional data, and local knowledge to collaboratively work with their partners to identify existing stresses on our streams, rivers, wetlands, and watersheds, decide the best way to address these impacts with consideration for wildlife and people, and outline restoration priorities for their regions, which considered all communities. For many, this was really kind of a shift from taking action in an ad hoc manner, generally guided by project funding opportunities, of course, to a more deliberate watershed scale planning process for the region, which considered many different habitat and community needs. Next slide, please. A good example of this is the Merrimack Restoration Partnership, or MRP. The partnership region covers 1,200 square miles, which spans from headwaters to the ocean. It's a big region. The partnership thrives by bringing all voices to the restoration planning and implementation process, including often underrepresented voices. MRP includes watershed organizations such as Nashua River Watershed Association and ORS, and also includes more local organizations such as Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust and Groundwork Lawrence, who are focused on urban river restoration and increasing access and representation in the urban watershed. Through the work of these local organizations, many urban dwellers of all ages are able to learn about their natural areas, how to access them, and participate in their restoration and stewardship. To date, they have engaged over 2,000 community members in the Merrimack watershed. Working at a watershed scale allows for both the urban and watershed-focused organizations to share their unique perspectives and develop partnership visions which allow all communities to mutually flourish. Next slide. Over to you.
Thank you, Allison. Another partnership pathway to success is the expanded table of prioritization for community benefits. You know, these partnerships have really identified high value pipeline of projects for restoration in their regions. And restoration projects can take many years to advance, as we all know, and people really see, from the concept all the way to shovels in the ground. It's important that we create this pipeline of projects at various stages to advance our critical needs. You know, we see these culverts and dams failing and other impacts of our fish and wildlife and biodiversity. And the partnerships are really a great example and way to get these projects up and coming and off on the races. And additionally, the partnership has worked, including identify specific restoration projects to advance throughout their regions. Like I said, including dam removals, culvert replacements, assessments of the impacts of culverts, as well as cranberry bog restoration, salt marsh restoration, and migration. as well as urban river revitalization and floodplain restoration, as well as increasing access to open space and our rivers and natural areas, which are all supporting our Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the governor's executive order on biodiversity. And these projects were prioritized identifying, restoration priorities, the ecology, the critters in the rivers, but also because they were bottom-up projects, they were really brought together by the restoration need and community need and municipality needs from the cities and towns, just to not only connect people to nature, improve quality of life, but also reduce maintenance issues and build better connections to our natural areas. And they really have been amazing to address multiple issues to our environment in our communities to help improve everyday people's lives. So I just find them really inspiring to see the work that they're doing every day. And additionally, the partnerships are advancing projects, like I said, with local input and expertise, bottom up, landowner cooperation and willingness, and other activities that I think is really a unique part of this project in this program. And one example of this is a regional project that is happening in Lowell, as well as communities upstream in the tributary to the Concord River and the Merrimack River called River Meadow Brook. And this is a great example of how the partnership and the different partners have brought a regional approach to climate resilience, biodiversity, and restoration projects in a project pipeline. So they examine both the lower and upper watershed sections. This river flows from the bottom of the screen up to the top, which is kind of confusing, but and they found a clearer picture of barriers along the river. They've identified all the different dams that are passage impacts to our natural migratory fish like river herring, and looked at the greatest need for restoration in this river system, which is really exciting. You can see all the different red dots of the dams, like I said, on the map. Additionally, the partners also were advancing the culvert assessments to find other different barriers to fish and wildlife passage, as well as flooding impacts in this area here, downtown Lowell, downstream of the first dam on the river. And they're looking to do more of this work, looking at other barriers upstream of this area. And one of the main barriers for fish passage and for flooding and climate resilience and biodiversity is the Congress Street Dam, which is right here in the Gateway City Environmental Justice Communities of Lowell. And the Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust has done a great job at engaging the community, getting the history of this dam, and looking at not only, this one dam project in the stream crossings, but looking at connecting the fish and the communities upstream to the natural and open spaces upstream in the upstream community. So it's just really great, comprehensive regional restoration project that we're really excited about that the partners identified. And the fourth pathway, or maybe I'll say river course, I want to share with the partnership is leverage funding. And the first investment that the Commonwealth through the partnership program has invested through DER to the partnerships has really catalyzed the ability of them to advance further funding from different agencies, different levels of government, including the federal government and the private sector, and individual donors and supporters and foundations. And for every dollar that DER and the Commonwealth has invested in the partnerships program, we have got $6 back in catalyst funding. And so it's a really great return on investment for DER and the Commonwealth. So we're really excited about the great work that the partners are doing, not only prioritizing their work, but also getting the work done and getting different funding sources to get these projects, like I said, from start to finish and connect people to nature. So additionally, they're developing this project pipeline from early feasibility studies and really getting a community focus and an adaptive approach to grant applications, and really able to access larger funding pots because of this initial investment by DER. So it's really exciting for areas that may not be more competitive for some other grants that are, maybe just diagenous fish or the sea run fish or other places that aren't supported by some of those larger grants. So just a very exciting process there. One example of that is the out in North Adams, which is an environmental justice community, another gateway city here in the Commonwealth, out in far out west northwestern corner of Massachusetts. It's one of the most flood-prone areas in Berkshire County for flooding. About a quarter of the city of North Adams is in a FEMA 100-year floodplain. We've got the Hoosick River flowing right through downtown. And the partnerships have identified the Berkshire Clean Coal Connected efforts to bundle multiple projects for grant applications, including this crazy dam here on the right hand side called the Beaver Mill Dam, which is failing and is a flood risk for the city of North Adams. So we're really excited to see that the partnerships were able to identify this and leverage over $3.6 million of federal funding to do this Hoosick River or North Hoosick River restoration projects, which included both funding from the state and the federal government. So it's just a really exciting project to see how they've leveraged this funding here in Western Massachusetts. So I'll hand it back off to Allison.
Great. Thanks, Robert. The partnerships work highlights how critical the capacity building funding and technical assistance is to creating these enormous potential for advancing ecological restoration throughout Massachusetts. We are seeing increased cross-boundary coordination, increased knowledge building, and locally led projects that are leading to larger regional system-wide impacts. We're seeing increased municipal assistance and landowner assistance, and we're seeing increased leverage funding to support ecological restoration projects. This state investment and restoration support has catalyzed watershed scale restoration and resiliency to meet the critical needs of our communities. Next slide. Robert, you want to take this poll?
Yes, it's now time for polls. Callie is going to put it up here in just a minute. Let me know, Callie, when it's up. We wanted to see what is your interest in potentially joining the Restoration Partnerships program. I can't see the poll, so Callie, feel free to jump in whenever it's going. Oh, here we go. Now it's up. It's on my other screen. This is, optional. Are you interested? Are you not? Maybe, is this something of interest? We have a couple more minutes. Oh. We get the results. Okay, great. Wow, this is good. So we got, as you can see here, and the folks if anybody's on the telephone, big majority, 72% of people are interested in joining the partnerships program. We have 26% of people are on the fence. Maybe they want to learn more. And also there's a couple people, or one person who is interested, is not really interested, but just here for the information. So we're really excited for you all to be here. All right. Get the next slide. Send it back to Allison.
Great. So it's nice to see all the interest. Robert and I are also excited about this program, and the partnership's early results, and we really want to build on this momentum. We see the potential to increase scale and pace of restoration throughout Massachusetts, and kind of building this network of restoration hubs, which provide technical assistance, expertise, and leadership. Right now we have 3 partnerships, but we hope to expand to cover the state eventually. Looking at this map to the right, on this slide, these are the pipeline of high benefit projects identified by 3 partnerships. Imagine if we expanded the partnerships, how many more projects we could catalyze across the state. Imagine that no matter what town you're in, there is a partnership there to help advance community-based restoration and free-flowing rivers available to all. So we have clearly set our goals very high, but as smaller next steps, we anticipate to release the request for responses in early 2026, with awards anticipated for summer of 2026. Next slide. So the eligible applicants for the next RFR are lead partnership sponsors. As we mentioned, those are kind of the leaders and the applicants of the partnerships, are 501c3 organizations and Massachusetts regional government and planning agencies. And then the core partners are those stakeholders that are sub-awarded funding from the lead partnership sponsor organizations. That eligibility is 501c3 organizations, regional government and planning agencies, tribal governments, or municipalities. I do want to caveat that the RFR is in its kind of final stages of development and review. So any interested applicants should really review that final RFR, because there's always kind of shifts and changes that happen. So make sure that all the information I'm saying today in terms of eligibility is also in the RFR. But that's typically the way that we're advancing. We also encourage any interested parties to reach out. We're going to have an expression of interest period, and it's anticipated for January. This period, or this, basically it comes as expression of interest form. This form is totally optional. It's definitely not required, but it is kind of an opportunity for you to share your partnership ideas with us. I think that wraps up what we wanted to share with you today, and I'll turn it over to Robert so we can hear from you.
Awesome. Thanks, Allison. I think it was a little trigger happy there. A little fast, sorry. But yeah, we'd like to open it up to questions and answer period. We have some questions already here in the Q&A, and folks may be already should already know how to use Q&A, because we did the whole test with having folks put their name and information, but looks like we have some questions. Oh, yep, everybody coming in. All right, so now we have one question from Kevin. For coalitions that provide grants to other organizations, do those grants need to stay within the state boundaries? For watersheds that cross state borders, would funding to organizations doing work on the river but in another state be allowed? Very good question. There's 2 questions within that. Allison, do you want to take those?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so shockingly, the river doesn't stop at the Massachusetts boundary. I get that. We have several organizations. 2 of our partnerships work in several states, and so they're kind of struggling with that same question. The funding that we provide from the state has to stay within the state. So the way that the partnerships have dealt with that, as an example, that leverage funding slide that Robert had showed of Beaver Mill Dams, that was a comprehensive project for North Hoosick River. And what they did is they applied the partnership funding for the Beaver Mill Dam, which was in Massachusetts, and then upstream of that is another dam in Vermont, and so they applied for separate funding through, I think it was probably federal funding for that piece of the project. And so we do require that all of the partnership funding from DER stay within the state. But that doesn't say that the partnership can't be working on projects that are out of state. We just won't fund that work.
Great. I think we answered all that. Okay, great. Other thing I want to note, because people can't see this, we had 72 people here. We still got a lot, over 60 people. Can for-profit consultants join? Ian asked this question. Do you want to take that, Allison, or I can take it?
I can take it. So for-profit consultants cannot be a core partner, which is a lead partnership sponsor. so they cannot receive the funding directly, and they cannot be sub-awarded the funding directly. But the for-profit consultants can definitely be part of the stakeholders group. We have some partnerships, like as you saw at Buzzards Bay, where they don't have core partners, they have the stakeholders, and so for-profit consultants can definitely be part of that group. The other partnerships, they have core partners, and not all of them receive funding. Some of them provide just technical expertise, and so they can be part of that partnership, but for-profit consultants cannot receive funding. They can, let me just caveat that by the partnership projects that they advance, they do hire consultants to advance that work. So they are part of the partnership in some way in that aspect too.
Yeah, so the consultants could be sub-awarded by the partnership.
Right, but they just, for specific
We're
projects.
hired for the projects. Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yep. All right, Lisa has a question. Do you have a sense of how many partnerships and how much total funding you're hoping to award this round?
Lisa, that's a really good question. Let me get out the crystal ball. So we don't really, we have kind of an idea of what the funding will look like, but we won't really know until a little later later in the fiscal year. So we have, right now we're currently working with 3 partnerships. We'd love to increase the total number of partnerships to, 4 to 6, but we'll kind of just see what the funding landscape looks like, and the applications and who kind of applies and make a decision then. We would like to expand though.
Yeah, and the budget process should be ongoing with the Commonwealth. So stay tuned. April asks, do all partnerships start at the catalyst stage, or might some more advanced start at a later stage of planning or implementation? Great question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess it depends. What is really key about the catalyst stage is that the partnerships develop or revise a strategic plan that's approved by DER. So it needs to be highlighting kind of all the key pieces of restoration, kind of the identified ecological stressors and the restoration activities that they want to advance. And so at submission, the partnership or the applicant would submit their strategic plan, and if it seemed like it was adequate, then the partnership may move on to the next phase, which is catalyst and action. We haven't had that happen yet. Typically, we want the new partnerships to come on, kind of review their strategic plan, make sure that it's good to go, kind of start to build those relationships, and then step into the catalyst and action phase. So we kind of have to make that call during the application process.
Okay. All right. Shayna asks, has there been any progress developing a partnership for the Connecticut River Valley? That's a good question. I wouldn't.
Good question. I don't know. We don't work in the Connecticut River Valley. We work in the 3 areas that we showed right now, and we would love to work in the Connecticut. We'd love to work all over the state, to be honest with you. But it seems like there's a lot of work going on over there, especially with the Connecticut River Conservancy. We'd love to see more restoration out there. So I don't know, but we would love to see more work happening or more partnerships out there.
I'd love, like you said, Alison, I'd love to see the whole Commonwealth tasted with the partnership. April asks, what DER technical assistance is provided through the partnership program, and how does this differ from complement technical assistance on DER priority projects?
Okay, this is a great question. So the DER priority projects is like the Cadillac version of DER, and that once you move a project into priority projects, DER helps kind of advance that project all the way through construction. And there's a lot of technical assistance involved in that from DER, because they're essentially the, kind of the project manager as well for the project. So that's kind of like the Cadillac. The partnership program, because we are working with partnerships that are advancing over 50 projects, we cannot possibly provide that level of technical assistance for each project. What we do is a lot of the technical assistance requests that come in are, can you review the scope of work and make sure it kind of covers what we need? Or can you review this H&H analysis and provide input? And that's kind of a one-off assistance that we provide. And over time, we're hoping to build the technical skills of the partnerships so that they don't need that. They don't rely on that assistance, and they can ask for different technical assistance over time. So it is a little bit different in that it's not high level technical assistance for every project, but it is kind of technical assistance to build their restoration skill sets. In addition, we really encourage the different partnerships to use each other as support. So now that they've been in for 4 years, they all kind of have a grasp of what each other is advancing, and they have it's like a wealth of knowledge. And a lot of them are working on the exact same thing. So we really encourage them to go to the other partnerships first, see if they can answer the questions. And if not, then we try to grab people from different DER teams to kind of help assist.
And I can add a little bit on that too. We also have a peer-to-peer learning, which is helpful, and send out a bunch of information on other learning opportunities. And people can always contact me too. I like to answer people's questions if I can answer them. Anonymous says, how many lead partnership sponsor grants do you anticipate to be awarded in 2026? And how do you plan to address, quote, competing applications from the same regions priority criteria?
So in terms of anticipate how many awards, I kind of already answered that, and that we don't really know. We're hoping to grow the partnerships. In terms of plan to address competing applications, I really encourage folks to connect with people in their regions and see kind of what partnerships make sense. In terms of evaluation, whoever kind of sets forward we're not going to choose two partnerships that are in the same region or that have overlapping regions. But I would just encourage the applicant to put their best foot forward. And I would read back through kind of some of our website materials. And once the RFR is released, we're really clear on the evaluation criteria. So I would try to make sure that you cover each one of those criteria areas.
And I'll just add on that, definitely fill out an EOI, if they got questions. That process is outlined. And also all the current partnerships are over 75 square miles in acreage or area, land area. So, and I guess water area too. Okay. Angela asks, is there a recommendation watershed size for partner? Oh, wow. That's funny.
Yeah.
Is there a recommendation water size for partnerships, or have you seen any differences in the type of projects come out large versus small partnership areas? So like I said, the current partnerships are at least 75 square miles. I don't know off the top of my head what the size of Merrimack is, but I believe that's the biggest one.
1,200.
Wow. See, Allison's coming out. And do you know the Berkshires and the other two?
I don't know, but the two partnerships we have that are the largest are Berkshires and Merrimack. They're pretty similar in size. In terms of the differences in the types of projects, it depends on the region. So our Southeast region, they're clearly focused more on salt marsh and tidal restriction, restoration type projects and bogs. The other two are really focused on culvert work and dam removal. And maybe that's because they're larger regions and think that they can kind of hit a larger scale with that. I would say that the biggest consideration for size of your region is really like, what are you hoping to accomplish and what's the best way to do that? And so in Merrimack region, it kind of makes sense, the size of their region, because there's just so many different types of projects that they wanted to advance, and they needed a lot of different core partners to come in and do that work, versus Buzzards Bay is really hyper focused on advancing their projects. And so they're kind of like moving through projects much quicker because they're not as complex in terms of stakeholders.
One other thing I'd like to note, if people don't know the geography and the hydrology, the Merrimack, all of the different subwatersheds, which some of the core partners are from, like Oars and the Concord, Aspet, Sudbury, they all flow in the Merrimack River, and that's the whole partnership. But Berkshire's is interesting because it's the county, and there are multiple watersheds, but they don't all flow the same way. So just something to keep in mind for organizing how the partnerships are organized. It just depends on how you structure your region. So just interesting to note that and they work together in the whole region. The Berkshires, they get along very well, which is cool. Okay, Anthony asks, are there given examples of core partners that examples? Hold on. Okay, are the given examples of core partners just that examples, or are there requirements around the types of partners that must be included in the partnership? For example, can a partnership comprise solely of a 501c3 organizations?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they could. Again, it's what we want to see in the application is understanding who are you proposing, or what type of partnership are you proposing? What are the key things that you're trying to address? And then we'll look at, okay, so the core partners, does that make sense? Do the core partners make sense to help address what they want to move forward? And so I don't think necessarily that we would say, oh, this so-and-so partnership shouldn't advance because they're all 501c3s. However, I think it's important to kind of make sure you're balancing the needs of the region and make sure that you have all the players at the table.
Okay, Cheryl asks, in this ecoregion, I believe, in reference to the Pine Barrens Southeast, in this ecoregion, Pine Barrens, ponds play a major role in the health and biodiversity of the ecoregion. Their restoration or the maintenance of their water quality and biodiversity is key to the overall health of the natural system. Is that work in a possible, quote, restoration project?
I think I'd have to understand a little bit more about the ponds, if they're natural systems versus man-made ponds. I think that in our RFR, it's pretty explicit about what is eligible and what is not eligible. We're really focused on rivers, streams, wetlands, salt marsh. So in advancing kind of the restoration and process-based restoration of those. So we don't do a ton of work in ponds necessarily, especially if they're man-made. But if it's a natural pond with adjacent wetlands, then we could, we just have to take a look at the specific project.
Yeah. No, that area does have natural ponds. So, okay. We got a lot of questions, so we'll try to go quick. And I'm okay staying a little longer. I don't know. Lisa asks, are there specific budget requirements for the anticipated funding? Example, last round of the funding went directly to one partnership coordinator.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So no, there's some like there's some restrictions on I talked about the 3 different tasks. So there's some restrictions on how much can go towards a specific task. That's all outlined. That'll be outlined in the RFR. I take a look at that. The model is very different than maybe the last designation RFR, and that what we're asking is for the partnership to propose specific tasks, and then you tell us how you're going to accomplish those with different staff. So whether that's a restoration coordinator or whatever it may be. But we do we do want to make sure that each partnership has some kind of restoration coordinator that's coordinating all the different stakeholders and partners.
Next one, I can answer this. Is a standard post-implementation monitoring requirements for partnership projects? No, it's all specific, mainly depending on what you all want to do from a community engagement perspective, or mainly from a perspective of the permitting process and the regulations. So the answer is no. Karen asked, how have you prioritized any region of the state for new partnerships? And I would say, can I answer that? No.
Mhm.
And it's open to all in the Commonwealth. And like we said, encourage EOIs and working collaboratively. Anything to add there, Allison?
No, I mean, I think our goal is to, spread the love across the state. So we do want to see kind of partnerships starting to spread across the state and not completely adjacent to each other. But that said, it just really is about the application. And, so I would encourage everyone to submit, and we do not have any kind of prioritized areas.
Great. Sean asks, some of our most promising restoration opportunities involve discussion collaboration with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. Would proposed partnership that involves liaisoning on these projects face issues due to cross-department division concerns? You want me to answer this? What do you want to answer?
I don't know what your answer is going to be.
You know what mine is?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, I know some of our current projects, including the one in Lowell, involve other state agencies. So the River Meadowbrook Congress Street Dam is owned by Mass DOT, and the partnership has contacted them and via me and other people. So I don't think it would preclude that. I don't know if that's accurate, Allison, or want to
No, I mean,
anything?
it's like case by case basis. We'd have to take a look at it, but overall, we encourage you all to kind of collaborate with other state agencies, especially since these are more kind of regional comprehensive projects.
Great. Kristen asks, is it possible to join an existing partnership if our organization is in the region? That's a really good question.
Yeah, so right now this RFR that would be coming out is the RFR designation grant. So if there is an existing partnership and there's interest in another like core partner coming on to that, then now is the time to be adding additional organizations to those existing partnerships.
Right. Okay. Matthew asks, is the process going to be transparent so that different organizations might be able to spot potential overlaps with other interested organizations, or whether a smaller organization might be able to support an application for their area?
It's if people, the more expressions of interest that we get, the more we can kind of identify those overlaps. The process in and of itself is hard to make it transparent. In that way, we don't have like a public facing website where we can kind of show this. But those expression of interest conversations, we will have the opportunity to kind of see who's interested. And if there's kind of multiple people in a region talking, we'll make sure that, you guys connect with each other.
And this, man, people are thinking together. Angela asked, will DER help connect partners in the same region if an expression of interest is submitted of overlapping regions? I believe the answer is yes from what you just said. Okay. Warren asks, I had assumed that Trout Unlimited was based on our past priority project working with DER, considering a partner, seemed to be a formalizing of the process. How does this change for the process DER will use when considering what will be adopted as a priority project? Warren, I'm not totally sure about your question. I think you may be asking if there's a current priority project, how is this different? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, so the priority projects are really different than the partnerships program. And when a priority project, I guess it's the same in that a priority project is accepted through a designation process as well. And so if, I think TU is oftentimes a partner on projects, but I think you would have to discuss it with the priority projects team on that.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely reach out. Um, Karen asks, we already answered this about no prioritized regions. Okay, anonymous, is there preference for applicant is more of a coalition-based application or of organization looking to be the lead and have subawards and such?
Just before I answer that, I want to recognize that we're over time now, so we'll stay on and answer these questions, but we will also post all these questions and answers on our website. So if you have to go, don't worry, you'll still get all the same information.
And we are still recording, and then
Yeah,
recording will be posted.
true. So there's not a preference. Again, it's really based on your partnership and your region and your priorities and what makes sense for you all.
Thank you, Cheryl, about talking about the natural ponds. Danielle, okay, thank you. Dan asks, okay, what have you done with cranberry bogs to open up water flow for migratory fish? We have a cranberry bog that is no longer operating, but dams are still in place using boards to regulate water levels to keep ponds in place. Are dams adjusted enough to enable water flow in spring during the migration? I can answer this. So,
Okay.
I don't know your specific example, but our program does support doing cranberry bog restorations to open up water flow for migratory fish and create habitat, flood storage, and also to create habitats and bring back the wetlands and the fisheries and the streams. So yes, we definitely work on that. Anonymous asks, does the lead partnership sponsor need to be based within an EJ community? Are there implicit or explicit deal breakers that would reduce the competitiveness of an application? This is the opposite of eligibility. That seems okay. You want
I
to
can
answer
answer
that?
it. Yeah, so there is evaluation criteria that considers environmental justice. It's important to the state of Massachusetts. There's also kind of a whole suite of things that kind of contribute into that evaluation, which include disadvantaged communities. We're really clear in the RFR about that evaluation criteria, so take a look at it, and you can kind of see how many points that is in the overall evaluation.
Great. Warren, yeah. If you have questions about different projects, feel free to reach out to me. I think I sent you my email. Thanks for coming. Okay, Lisa asked, would one organization statewide be able to be a part of different partnerships regionally? Huh? I don't know.
So yeah, like TU, because they have their like separate regional. In general, I would say that we don't want, like, let's say a watershed organization applying for two different partnership applications. That becomes really complicated and can lead to issues during selection. But I think that there are entities that are completely distinct from each other, where they have like their regional focus areas that are, statewide organizations, but they have their regional focus areas, like TU and the Berkshires. I can't remember their specific names. So those are separate entities. So we would consider those.
Anonymous, the last question we have here is, what if our partnership is advanced, but the project we're proposing, regional culvert analysis, is new? Are we early or mid stage? Maybe I would say fill out an EOI, maybe.
Yeah, fill out an EOI, and also, based on your application, partnerships will determine what kind of stage that you would be in. Great. I think we got through
Great.
them all.
Yep.
So I just want to say thank you all so much for coming. Some of you stay on late. We really appreciate it. There's a lot to cover. We're really excited about the partnerships program, and we're excited to see so many people interested in that. So as we said, the expression of interest period will be opening up pretty soon. Stay tuned. We have your email addresses so we can share out any updates on the RFR and the expression of interest in terms of when those are released, and everything should be on our website. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.